Welcome to a new episode of Free New Life podcast. So we're going to discuss something that affects all Jehovah's Witnesses, and it even affects XJWs, and it will continue to affect us if we don't realize how the Watchtower had basically set us up for financial failure. So we're going to discuss how this organization, through many type of manipulative tactics, they have managed to keep their people, for the most part, poor and completely reliant on the new system. Or don't worry, Jehovah will provide, right? So live paycheck to paycheck. Don't worry about retirement. Don't worry about making overtime, but basically just, seek the kingdom first and end's gonna come. But basically, this really does set witnesses up for financial failure. And for those of us who are XJWs, if we don't understand how we've been brainwashed in this sense, it can still affect us even till to this day. Um, so we're going to just jump right into this conversation. And first, I'm thinking me and Samantha will discuss when it comes to employment, right? Because right when it comes to selecting a job, they set us up for financial failure. So, what have you noticed, Samantha, as far as how witnesses are sabotaged even with the type of jobs that they're allowed to take?
I think there's a lot of conditioning and rules that are set about the job you have. One is that you should never ever miss a meeting or ministry opportunities or groups because of your work. So a witness would never take a job where they have to work on a Saturday. It's quite rare. Or they wouldn't take a job that they have to work evenings because then they'd miss their midweek. So those are an absolute no-no. And I do remember also, like, there would be examples given of people refusing promotions at work or turning down certain jobs because they would feel that it's going to take their focus off their spiritual activities and it's going to be like too taxing. There would be a lot of rules of where you can't work, and also sort of rules like, oh, you shouldn't work for any religious organization, certainly not a church or a Christian organization, not even as a caretaker. I remember that being like a big article about it, like you would not want to do that kind of job. And obviously, there's many other jobs where there would be articles about, oh, you could be compromised in your faith. So really, it limits it a lot. So you have to basically have a job that fits around your congregation activities, doesn't give you any glory at all, basically, so that you can never boast that you've made it to supervisor or something like that. So you have to be very humble, take a job that's very limited in hours, preferably part-time. I always felt that people who worked part-time would mention it as a badge of honor. I work part-time. I've managed to keep my life so simple that I work part-time so I can do more ministry. So that's almost like a badge of honor that I've managed to get part-time work.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I remember that exact thing, especially when I wanted to regular pioneer, that it was a badge of honor when I was able to say, "Oh, I got a part-time job." Like, Jehovah's proud of me. I can do so much for the kingdom. But I know here in the United States, so there's a lot of good opportunities, like a lot of good companies to work for, and some of them are union based or based on seniority. So sometimes you can get a really good job, but you got to start at the bottom. And most people don't want to work overnights or second shift, what we call it in America, where you're basically working in the late afternoon to night. So witnesses automatically cannot take jobs like that because it's going to interfere with your midweek meeting. So you automatically cannot take second shift or third shift. Well, that's a problem because a lot of times companies that are really good do base it on seniority. So when you get your foot in the door, you may have to start with one of those bad shifts, but witnesses don't have the option to say, okay, well, let me just do this for a couple of years, then I'll eventually get on first shift. Like, no, you can't take it at all. And then another big thing too is overtime. So typically the average person is going to work Monday through Friday, whether it's first, second, or third shift. Monday through Friday is kind of average for a full-time job. So usually the weekend is when overtime is available. And usually jobs will pay like time and a half or double time. So overtime allows people to get caught up in their bills. So that's a good thing when they have overtime. But that's also frowned upon is because they want you out in service Saturday. And they make it seem like, and this goes to your point where like you can never miss a meeting, is that so they make it seem like you have to be out in service every Saturday with your service group. Well, why can't you work overtime maybe 2 or 3 days a month on Saturday, but they make you feel that it's wrong. You need to be out in service. So some jobs that have mandatory overtime, because sometimes they'll tell you when you get hired, well, when it gets busy, it's mandatory overtime. So witnesses are told don't take those jobs if it's mandatory overtime because you're going to miss your weekend service. Um, so that does really just set a person up for financial failure because the thing about overtime is that even people that don't have the great jobs, you can still make decent money because you're getting paid time and a half and then you're getting paid over 40. So like overtime kind of gives everybody a chance to get ahead a little bit when it says don't have that. And one experience I had was that I got my CDL license in America to drive tractor trailer trucks. That's what I do. And some truckers can make a lot of money. Like you can start off with six figures. That's kind of normal if you're willing to travel away from home. So ideally, what some truckers do is when they get their license, they'll go over the road. They may be gone for a couple of weeks, but they don't have to keep that lifestyle. Some of them do it just to build up a lot of money. And you can make, I mean, I've seen some truck drivers that will basically work maybe 3 or 4 years and buy a house cash, not go through mortgage company because you can make that type of money. And then you get out of that work after you maybe built some money, then you can go back to local work. But when I first got my CDL license in America, I was told, oh, nope, don't even think about it because you're going to miss your meetings. You have to be at all the meetings. Like they make you feel that they, it's almost like when you're in high school or even elementary school. If you miss so many days, you don't pass to the next grade, right? You like there's a certain quota where like you miss so many days, you automatically fail. Well, that's how the witness organization is set up. They make you feel that like they're in charge of it. Like you can't miss so many days. Otherwise, you're a bad Christian and you're disappointing Jehovah. You're not making Jehovah's heart rejoice. Satan's happy because and it's just a bunch of crap. But yeah, so they make you feel that like you don't have any options. You can't even for a period of time miss meetings to maybe get your foot in the door at a good company or like in my case, go over to road trucking. So I'm kind of embarrassed to tell you even what I used to make when I was Jehovah's Witness, and I'll get into that when you show those statistics later. But I could have been making so much more money with being a truck driver, and with all the different skills that I have. Like I can drive tanker trucks, doubles, all this hazmat, but I can't do any of those. I couldn't do that stuff before because of the whole witness. So basically, I worked part time, which we'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, they set you up for financial ruin even as far as what you're allowed to take. And I remember there was even one time where I had got hired at this job. This is before I got my CDL when I first became actually I don't think I was baptized yet. I was about to get baptized, but I applied for this job that it made parts that go on helicopters. But during my interview, I was asking questions about it, and they said that some of the contracts that they have go on military helicopters. So it wasn't even all the helicopters, but just some of the, I mean, it wasn't even all the parts, but some of the parts were contracted with the military. So just because of that one thing, I couldn't take the job. I ended up working for somewhere less, and this is again before I got my CDL, but basically, yeah. So right from the start, your employment is messed up, and then that also goes into college because people who want to go, and I know college is not for everybody, but there are certain positions where if you have a college degree, you're going to be more successful. Even if you want to be a business owner with a degree in business, you can get a loan to start a business. Without that degree, it's harder to walk into a bank and say, "Hey, I want $100,000 to start a business." You kind of need those degrees sometimes. But again, witnesses are frowned upon as far as don't ever go to college. So right away, you're not going to have any doctors, any lawyers, any of those really good paying jobs that you have to go to college for. It's not going to happen. But it's interesting because Bethel will send people to college to be lawyers for them to defend Watchtower when they get in trouble. But that's a whole nother story. Um, so basically that's how they ruin us as far as the actual jobs that we take. Now, another aspect of the financial ruin is basically, I like to call this the living the paycheck kind of mentality. I don't know how if this is something you've experienced. But yeah, let me ask you if you experienced that before I get into my thought. But what have you seen as far as the mentality that a lot of witnesses have of the whole paycheck to paycheck of basically, oh, don't worry, Jehovah will take care of things. Just go to your meetings. Don't worry about that. The Armageddon's coming. You don't really have to worry about your future. Just as long as you, and they use the scripture that says like, uh, how does it go? Like each day pray for your bread or something like that. Like each day that, just thank God for bread and that your daily needs are met. So when they twist scriptures like that to just make sure your daily needs are met, that is a way they're subliminally putting in that mentality of just live paycheck to paycheck. Like as long as you got your food for today and the next day, like don't really worry about saving money and making sure you're making enough. Just basically paycheck to paycheck. But what is your thoughts on that?
Well, that reminds me of that verse that they do quote a lot, which is, if you have sustenance and covering, that's kind of what all God sort of promises you is sustenance and covering, that you've got the absolute bare basics. And there is a real promoting and glamorizing being poor and just trusting that Jehovah's going to provide. And like you said, getting through paycheck to paycheck. And I think that's incredibly damaging. I think a lot of witnesses go through unnecessary hardship because of that mentality. And I think they also forget. I think it's really just very unbalanced, because there's also stories in the Bible of God blessing people with incredible riches. Not everybody is rich, but there's people there who have fantastic positions in life. Joseph was a prime minister. Daniel was very high up in the administration of two different governments. And you know what? There was Naaman, who was an actual commander, a general of a whole army of a country. Now, they were not told to stop being and holding those positions once they became believers. It was the opposite, especially with Joseph and Daniel. They were believers, and God blessed them with those positions for a reason. Now, why would God change? Why would suddenly, now in later days, it change? Why would God want people to be in poverty? Poverty is a bad thing. There's scriptures in the Bible that say it's a bad thing. Why would God want you to be in poverty? That doesn't make sense. Why would He give you gifts and abilities? Why would He encourage hard work if He wanted you to then remain poor? So it's a very, very twisted kind of mindset. And I actually think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think if people are struggling, they are more likely to be seeking something to help them. So if you're poor and you think that going to meetings, Jehovah's going to bless you with enough money to get through your next set of bills, you're going to be at every meeting. You're going to be at every ministry group praying that something miraculous happens. And of course, sometimes it does. I'm not saying some witnesses haven't been blessed. I certainly prayed in certain situations as a witness, and I do feel that I was helped. Um, but looking back, I think that was nothing to do with the organization. I think that was to do with my trust in God. And I actually think they did cause a lot of problems. For example, once I got married, I had terrible health issues, which I certainly in part attribute to being in the organization. It did not help my health issues, because I became very sick because I held down a job, and it was for the most of the time full time. And I was trying to do all the ministry meetings. I was trying to do all the ministry and the meetings. So I just absolutely worked myself into the ground. I wasn't physically very strong to start off with. So it absolutely exacerbated my health issues, which then put myself and my husband, once we got married, we had a lot of financial issues, partly because I was not well enough to work by this point. I was actually very sick. And you do get some benefits in the UK, but that's quite minimal, especially when you live in a place as expensive as London. And then what happened with my ex-husband is he was actually retraining. He retrained from doing like a quite basic banking job. He retrained to be a carpenter. Now he could have potentially as they called here, a chippy. He learned a lot of the trade from his father, who was a very good builder. And had he had the confidence to take on his own jobs, he could have made a lot of money. But because he was brought up as a witness, and that caused him a lot of struggles, a lot of mental health and emotional problems, he never had the confidence to set up his own business. He found it very stressful to work for himself. So that limited his income. It was the lack of confidence instilled in him by the Jehovah's Witness organization growing up in it. And absolutely with witnesses, there was that thinking that you don't need to plan ahead, you don't need to think ahead. Something will always get you through. And like you said, there's that thinking that Armageddon's around the corner, so you're going to lose everything anyway. And I'm sure they would say things like, you can't take anything through Armageddon, you can't take things to the new system. So why would you want to kind of accumulate wealth for yourself or things? Do you remember that? I'm sure that was a thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that goes into the whole mindset too, with even buying property, which is another subject that oh don't worry, in a new system is when you can build a house, right? So you don't need to worry about trying to be a homeowner now. And yeah, they do stress the fact of, well, you can't take your things, so why worry about all these things? Basically, God's gonna destroy everything. But you said a couple of things I want to backtrack a little bit to touch on is when you mentioned how, there's people in the Bible who are wealthy. They were hard workers in the Bible. It doesn't say, oh, they work part-time, they work 15 hours a week so they can preach. Like when you read the Bible, like you can tell that these people were hard workers. For example, Jesus, you could call him, I guess, stepfather Joseph was a carpenter. I don't think he was part-time. He probably was working at least 8 hours a day. Like you can picture Joseph being a hard worker. And I'm not saying part-time is lazy at all, but basically, ideally, most people should work full time unless you have a job that's part time that pays well. But ideally, you want to work full time just because there's more money, basically. Um, so, but the Bible, like, it doesn't say, oh, they were working part time because they were just like at the temple all the time. Like, no, they were hard workers in the Bible. So, where does this whole part time come from? And they always have these articles like, oh, can you pioneer? Can you pioneer? Well, the easiest way to pioneer is working full time. So they always want to put those like guilt trips on you. Oh, well, can you do more for Jehovah? Can you pioneer? Pray about it. Well, obviously you're going to want to work part-time because there are some people that work full-time and pioneer, and those people, they don't last very long. You could tell they're miserable. The ones that have a full-time job and they're trying to still pioneer. Um, but then another thing you said that I want to mention was I think I need to take notes sometimes when we do these podcasts because you'll say things I'm like, oh, that was a good point. I want to touch on that. Uh, I might have to just come back because I can't remember what you were saying. Um, but let's just go another subject. If it comes back to me, what you said when I rewatched the video, I remember what it was that I wanted to comment on. But another thing that goes with the whole employment thing is even setting up for things such as retirement because people will. It's important to save money and plan these things, but witnesses they don't even think about things like retirement or things like that because they're always thinking the end's about to come. Oh, did you hear the new watchtower? The way they were talking at the convention. Oh, the end's right around the corner. It's coming soon. But when you look at the history of this religion, they've always put in their members the end is coming to keep them in that state of fear and that state of control. Like, don't worry about anything. So back in 1914, the end was supposed to come. So they weren't preparing for a future because the end's about to come. Then they did it again in 1915 and then 1925, then 1975, which was the big thing. And the same thing in 1975. Why did they quit their jobs and take early retirement and all that stuff? Because they were told the end's about to come, right? And I don't think that was stupid. If I was around in 1974 and I believed that, I would have done the same thing. Like, I'm going to just quit and have fun, right? Like if the end's coming next year, why go back to work if I have enough money saved? So you could see why the people that sold their houses and did all that stuff, why they did that and why they got upset when it end didn't come. But even today, Jehovah's Witnesses, so they're smart enough to not give any more dates. But then they pull that whole generation crap of, oh, the people from that generation in 1914, they'll still be alive. So Witnesses still have that mindset of, well, it has to be soon, right? Because those people are still alive, right? They're almost died out. So it has to be soon. So they still have that mentality like the end's coming, so we don't have to really worry about retirement and things like that. And another part of that is when it comes to buying property. So if you get a mortgage and pay off your house, once you get a mortgage, you're locked until that monthly payment. Rents go up all the time. All the time they go up. I know people who have beautiful houses and their mortgage is like $800 a month for this beautiful because they've been paying that same mortgage for the last 15 years or so. So it's smart if you can eventually buy a house because these are the things you want to think about when it comes to retirement. You don't want to still be paying rent. And then if you own your house, you have more money left over. Then if you want to sell it, you have equity on the house and things like that. Like there's financial benefits when you own property and your rent doesn't go up. And then when you pay it off, you can sell it if you want to sell, or you can rent it out. But witnesses a lot of times won't even think about things like that. They'll just keep paying rent for the rest of their life. Now, a witness that's had the same apartment for 30 years, they could have had three houses by then, right? They could have had one house, paid it off, rented that house out, bought another house, rent that house out, or flip it. But when you're in your 70s and you're still renting, and I'm not saying anything bad about people in that situation, but what I'm saying is that Watchtower creates these scenarios where people don't think about these things. They think the end's coming any minute. It's sort of like, um, and my ex-wife was one of these people who, oh, I don't want to have children because the end's coming. Well, some witnesses could already have children that grown up and got their own children now, but they've never had children because the end's about to come. I mean, I don't want to veer off too much from that subject, but it's the whole idea of that when you're a witness, you don't plan these things. You don't even think about these things. So then I've seen witnesses when I was still in who were elderly and they're still like in an apartment building. Um, they barely have enough money to get through the month. They get their money on the first of the month or any of these bad situations. And then when they really need help, sometimes the elders will tell them, oh, well, reach out to your disfellowship children. So they'll tell you cut your children off if they leave the organization. Don't ever speak to them. But then when they're in these situations where they need some extra care because they can't afford the care, they need care. Oh well, don't you have a daughter or son? Maybe we should reach out to them. Like what kind of crap is that? You they told you to cut your family off. Now reach out to your family. Why don't the elders help with all that stuff? Why doesn't the congregation help those people with their finances? They don't. And I remember one time when I was a witness, we went to go see this elderly sister that was in an apartment building, dirt poor, and it's sad too because the only reason that we went to visit her is because we were counting service time. We're pioneers. We don't have enough return visits. We're bored. We're counting time. Oh, let's go visit sister so and so, and we're just doing it because we're counting our service time. That's the reality of it. I don't mean to sound mean about it, but a lot of times the only time these older witnesses are being visited is on service time. But anyway, so we went to this apartment uh while we were counting service time to encourage this older sister. And the only thing we really had to say to her is, don't worry, Jehovah knows how you feel, right? And open up the Bible. Oh, look, Jehovah's close to the brokenhearted. You know, I don't think she felt Jehovah was close to the brokenhearted because she's in this bad situation. The only time people come to see her is when they're out in service anyway, but it's like the organization doesn't really care. It's like they're just throwing scriptures. Oh, don't worry, Jehovah knows how you feel. That doesn't change the fact that your finances are messed up and you can't get the treatment that you need, and all this stuff is happening. But I don't know. I know I threw a lot of stuff out there, but what are your thoughts as far as the whole like retirement part of it? Like how witnesses are not trained to really set themselves up for a future.
I think that's very true. And I think people then live to regret it because, like you said, the organization doesn't provide for people. So somebody could be a so-called full-time servant for decades, sacrifice having children, buying a house. They're not going to get a fat pension at the end of it. If they got a fat pension and all sorts of benefits at the end of it, you could then say, okay, fair enough, at least they're being taken care of. But because of that mentality that, oh, we don't want to pick up the bill, we don't want to have a responsibility towards people, we want to just take advantage, because that's what it is, take advantage of free labor, use people, in return for absolutely just pittance or covering costs, and then conveniently just say Jehovah will take care of you. And like you said, then often even relatives that might not be witnesses have to help out because they haven't got anything. And when you were talking earlier about um, how witnesses are encouraged to not work, it reminded me of a scripture, and this is so ironic because in Matthew 24, towards the end, Jesus talks about concerning that day and hour nobody knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but the Father. And then a few verses later, he describes what it's going to be like when the Son of Man returns. It says, then two men will be in the field, one will be taken and one left. Two women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken, one will be left. So isn't that interesting? The man in the field and the woman grinding the mill, they're working. They're working at agricultural jobs, which back then would have been majority of people's trades and professions. So isn't it interesting that Jesus is saying like they were just at their workplace working hard. They were not on trolleys. They were not working for Bethel. Do you see what I mean? The Bible does make it quite clear you're meant to have a job. You're meant to be working. Your salvation is not tied to it because the man in the field, one is taken, one is not. So one is saved, one isn't. And the woman at the mill, one is taken, one isn't. But they're at the same place of work. So I just thought it was really interesting because as you spoke, that verse came to my mind, and I thought, well, Jesus never said, quit your jobs. Do you see what I mean? Go around telling people to just quit their jobs. He might have said it to the apostles when they were young men, follow me, but that was to train them for future. They went back to work, you know. They went back and they lived in Jerusalem for decades. They would have had families and jobs. But anyway, a little bit digressed there. But I think in terms of future, that witnesses just do not encourage any financial planning. It's not even in the vocabulary. And I also find it really fascinating that witnesses will endlessly absolutely talk rubbish about so-called Christendom. Do you know what's one of the biggest initiatives in the UK run by churches locally, and all different denominations run this? It's a big charity called CAP, Christians Against Poverty. So there's a big movement here where churches in each location have days where people can come in, they have financial issues. The church will make sure there's people there that know finances, know how to get you out of poverty and advise you. CAP, Christians Against Poverty. Churches in the UK, it's a big initiative to try to help people that are poor. Now, ironically, a lot of witnesses could really benefit from visiting some of those CAP centres. And I just think that's really ironic that on the one hand, there's a group that think that they are better than everybody else because they have the truth. Yet there's no evidence of blessing. There's no evidence of financial blessing. And I think it's notable that in the Bible, when the nation of Israel and Judah were doing well, they were wealthy. God's blessing was evidence in not just there being peace in the nation, but also wealth. So I think some questions need to be asked. And I think also once you leave witnesses, you need to start to change that mindset. Wouldn't you say, Quinn, that that's a challenge when you leave, like how to change the mindset?
Yeah, and I think that it's hard to change your mindset because I think it's deliberate brainwashing. And they really want witnesses to stay in a state of financial ruin. And one thing I think is that so by by basically making it so that you don't plan for your future, you don't think about it, you don't think about making money, you don't think about investments, you don't think about trying to buy property. What it does is it creates a situation where they're completely reliant on the new system and help from the congregation. So, and that's where they want. So, say for example, if let's just say that there's someone's daughter who's a witness, and she's living paycheck to paycheck, no future plan. She might not get financial help from the congregation, but she'll get financial help from her family. So if she's in a state where she doesn't have anything on her own really because she's living paycheck to paycheck, what happens if she gets disfellowshipped or tries to leave? She has nothing, right? So that's another thing I think they're doing is they want to make it where you only rely on the congregation. So a person knows like, and there's women who like young women who maybe got this fellowship because they went and had sex or something. Now they have a baby and they're by themselves. They don't have help from their family because, oh, you didn't follow the rules. So I think that's part of it too, that they know that like, okay, if we keep them in a state of financial ruin where they have no future, they're living paycheck to paycheck, it's another trap of why people are so afraid to leave because like, oh, if I leave, I'm not going to have help when I need help. I can't call my parents for money. I can't get a loan from this brother because they left the organization. So that's one part of it, I think. And then as far as the whole new system thing, witnesses have all their eggs in one basket. So their only hope of any real life or happiness is they're waiting for the new system. So all their eggs are in that basket for the new system. So as long as they have nothing, what keeps them going is, well, I know it's going to be tough. I know I don't have a future. I don't have money in the bank. I didn't, but the new system's coming, right? So it keeps them focused on the kingdom. They don't want to hear nothing about the kingdom. They don't want to hear about like anything about investments or starting a business. All they're focused on is the kingdom. All their eggs are in one basket. So I think that's all designed to keep them trapped where the new system is their only hope, and that they better obey because if they ever leave the organization, they're not going to have that financial support that they need. But if you take somebody who's successful, who has a business, they got money in the bank, they plan their future well, it's not as scary for them to walk away because they don't need their parents. They don't have to still call their parents to borrow money because they have their own life set up. So I think it's very deliberate to keep them in financial ruin. And another thing about that I just want to touch on is that there are some wealthy witnesses. And I noticed that as far as the wealthy witnesses, sometimes they're elders because elders don't follow the rules the same way. So I've known elders that were very well off that own businesses. They're not practicing what they preach. Sometimes these same elders would be the ones running the pioneer meetings. Like, oh, they're running the pioneer, but they got businesses. So there are wealthy witnesses, but it's because some of them don't play by the rules. They basically will preach from the platform. Oh, we'll try to pioneer and keep a simple life. But some of those elders, they can pioneer, but they're not pioneering. They're smart, where they're making good money. So you do catch that hypocrisy. But in general, the witnesses are poor. Besides the few ones that, and then sometimes when you have a witness that is successful, he's looked at as bad association, right? The witness that's not there that's not out in service every Saturday because he's got maybe a responsible job. They're just looked at as, well, they're not spiritual. You're spiritual if you're broke, basically. Um, and that goes along with what you said in the beginning of this video, how it's like a badge of honor when you work part-time. Oh, I got a part-time job, more for Jehovah. And uh another aspect is the circuit overseers, for example. So I remember that when I was a witness, we had two circuit overseers at one point that both were retiring. And so they were like either 69 or already 70. And at 70, they discard them. So in both of these cases that I remember, these circuit overseers, the circuit that I was in was their last circuit. So some of them, like when you talk to them, they were still trying to figure it out. Yeah, we might go here. We got some friends there. We're trying to look to see maybe where we can settle down at. So what the SEALs have to do when they're almost 70 is they have to figure out themselves, based on the circuits that they've served and the congregation, people they know, who can maybe help them out. Like who maybe knows an apartment, who maybe somebody's got an apartment for rent, or they know somebody. So they got to figure this out on their own. And when you think about it, it's like when you're dealing with a narcissist and they discard you. The narcissist has this weapon where when they've drained you up for all that they can draw, all the energy that they sucked out of you and left you dry, when you can't do anything for them anymore, the narcissist will discard you. And that's what this organization does. They discard these people. So these circuit overseers, they've dedicated their whole livelihood to this religion. They have an allowance that they have. The branch does pay for their car and things like that, and they give them their little bit of money for food or whatever. But then when the branch is like, okay, you're too old to be a circuit overseer, you're just discarded. Why why doesn't the branch just simply make a couple of phone calls and say, hey, we got this circuit overseer retiring. And why don't they find a place for the circuit overseer and his wife to live at? And they could do that because there's so many brown nosers in this organization. Everybody wants to move up the status. So people would do it for status. Oh, a circuit overseer needs a place to stay. Oh, yeah, yeah, we'll help him out in the department. So it'd be very easy for the branch to organize that and find out, hey, how many people who want to score brownie points basically will help the circuit overseer find an apartment or rent to the circuit overseer, let the circuit overseer live in their house. But it's like you're just discarded. The branch doesn't care. The COs are on their own. They got to figure out where they're gonna relocate to, and then like they got to figure out their financial situation. And the branch doesn't even help them out with that. And it's just like it's a discard. This organization, they discard you when they don't need you anymore. But then those circuit overseers, they got to worry about like at 70 now, okay, restarting over, and how are they going to live? Um, so I don't know, what are your thoughts on like that whole aspect and how like not just circuit overseers, but even like when Bethelites get kicked out when they're like, oh, we don't need you anymore. Um, what is your opinion on those subjects?
Well, I think the interesting thing is that because they sort of sign paperwork saying it's a religious order that they're entering and they are now signing a vow of poverty, that's how legally the organization can get away with it. Because if they were viewed as employees, the organization could be sued for millions by probably everybody who's ever been through that experience because they haven't provided the basic, they haven't provided them with a salary from which they could pay their income tax. Here in the UK, they would have paid contributions towards their pension. And really that you've got to ask this question. Jehovah's Witnesses like to be registered as a charity in every country, a religious charity organization. They get all kinds of benefits and tax breaks as a result. Yet they don't pay anybody salaries. So you've got to ask, well, why are they not giving back into the country's economy? Because they're not. Witnesses as a group are just actually a massive drain. So many witnesses in the UK exist on benefits. They use the benefit system. They don't hardly work, so they're not putting much in, but they're certainly draining public finances. And also, many gifted young witnesses are never getting an education because that's frowned upon. And there's some examples I could give you. It was quite heartbreaking. There was a young pioneer sister in my congregation. She loved children, loved babies. Up until the age of I think it's 19, you can get free education in the UK. So even though she was homeschooled, she could have gone to the local college away. She could have walked there. She could have done a free course in childcare, in childminding. Instead, she was pioneering and she was giving school children lessons in piano because she'd learnt to play the piano. Her parents had been quite ambitious for some reason with the music side. So she could give piano lessons, but her heart was for children and babies. And I remember doing ministry with her and saying, well, why don't you do a course at the local college? You could have it for free. And she would have probably been able to do a part-time course at that point. College courses rarely are every single day. So she could have still done her pioneering. She could have done a free course. But no, it was absolutely, it just the thought of it was like completely beyond her that she could get herself a qualification in something she would love to do. And I just thought that's an example of how intensely crazy the thinking is that you should just do cleaning or whatever menial job and pioneer. And I think that's a really valid point about finances. And the other thing that I wanted to say about finances is really the organization doesn't want people getting a good job and getting into positions where they have money, because with money comes power and influence. And imagine if you've got people in positions of power and influence because they have financial wealth, and then they start to question what the organization's doing. What a nightmare situation. And I think we all have spotted that the few celebrities that are witnesses seem to have a different rule book. So they can be witnesses, but they can still do the sort of famous lifestyle. I'm pretty sure Prince was like that because he was already really famous when he became a witness. And another that probably comes up a lot is I see Serena Williams doing lots of things that all the other celebrities do. Now, if a normal witness, went and did the things she does, went to the places she went to, wore the things she wears, said the things she said, they'd be in a lot of trouble. But because she's got enough wealth and fame, they won't say anything. They won't, because it would be dangerous if she turned on them. So I think there's so much hypocrisy. And there's
Oh,
one thing, yeah, sorry.
oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, along with the celebrity thing, I just had this thought when you were talking is that, yeah, like say Prince, for example, what about when he's going on tours? He's missing his meetings, right? What about all that stuff? But as you said, it is a different rule book. And the same thing with the Jackson family. So I don't know if Michael Jackson was actually ever a baptized witness, but it was a fact that his family were baptized witnesses. So they were Jehovah's Witness family. But they're sending their kids on tour to all over the United States singing out. So they're not at their meetings, but like you said, it flies wide because influence, right? They got power. So you can clearly see the Michael Jackson family was not the average Jehovah's Witness family. Not only were they making a lot of money, but they obviously weren't at their meetings or on they're on tours. But yeah, it is a different rule book for those celebrities that are in that organization. And yeah, if they turn on them, yeah, it'd be big because they have a big voice too. So if somebody like Prince woke up to the religion and started making music about it, like it, Watchtower would probably already be closed down if a celebrity witness ever was vocal about it. But another thing I wanted to touch on too was when you mentioned how like promotions and things like that, and they don't want witnesses to like who are very talented to do anything with that talent. They always have this line where they say use your talent for Jehovah. So they recognize there's a lot of talented people, but they want to try to like an energy vampire, extract that energy. Oh, use it for Jehovah. You know, like use somehow whatever talents you have, use it for the organization somehow, whatever your skills are. Um, and yeah, so they don't want you to actually use your skills to better yourself. They just want to abuse that energy and take it for themselves. Um, but another thing too I wanted to mention is so when it comes to vacation time, there are witnesses who earn vacation time. But the organization wants you to use your vacation time to work for free at Bethel. So they'll put little remarks out there like that as far as like, can you take time off from work to work on some project at Bethel? And witnesses do that. They're witnesses that work hard, have a real job, but then they use their vacation time off from work to then work for free for the Watchtower. And then like when you catch them selling their luxury real estate and things like that, like different properties that they flip and sell, they're not splitting those profits with the brothers with the skills that built some of those structures and buildings. They're taking all of that. So you got these, and witnesses are good builders. So think about all the skills of the witnesses that are building the kingdom halls and assembly halls. They're not they could probably make a pretty good living um in construction building stuff like that, but they don't. They have these construction skills and they work for free and get nothing out of it. And then Watchtower behind their back flips these buildings and sells them. But yeah, there's so many different aspects on how they just set you up for financial ruin. But what I think the important thing to really get across during this video is that for all XJWs to realize that we have been conditioned to not really be financially responsible, to not really take things seriously, to live paycheck to paycheck, and not really think about the future. Um, and I know myself, and I'd like to hear your story, Samantha, is like I'm still affected by this, and I have to get a handling on it of understanding, like, wait a minute, the paradise isn't coming in a year from now. I'm 45 years old. I think, I sometimes even forget my age because of the whole witnesses can't celebrate birthdays. I can't even tell you if I'm 44 or 45. I know I'm a year. How old are you? Because I'm a year older than, I mean, I'm a year younger than you. That I know.
You shouldn't ask a lady her age. It's
Okay.
very, very rude here in Britain. But
I'll edit it out.
you know what? I'm 46.
Okay. So I'm
I
45
am
then.
46, yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's very true what you were saying. We have been given a poverty mindset and you have to undo it. I'm still working on mine because I'm still, for example, I'm building up a company of my own. I'm starting to get all the contacts in place. I'm starting to get more and more exciting, bigger projects, I know it's going to, in the end, give me much more income than a 9 to 5 job. And I am still left with some residual health issues. I'm way better since I left the organization. There's been a lot of healing, but it works for me better to be a sort of master of my own time and freelance. But I'm also building some side businesses for additional income streams. And I actually think once you leave, think carefully what you want to do. What are your skills? What transferable skills do you have? So some of the transferable skills I got from the organization is years of theocratic ministry school. I now use it because I do radio, I do podcasts professionally as well as here, and I also do voiceover. And I also am really an all-round communications professional. And a lot of those skills I did pick up in the organization. Now I'm monetizing them. But another thing is get yourself an education. It's actually really fun to study as an adult because you appreciate it so much more. Your motivation is totally different than from when you're younger. And it's surprising what you can still learn. And it's surprising where you can get. And just remember, if you consistently work hard and regularly, it's impossible for you to not get results. So if you apply yourself, you're prepared to work hard, the results will come. And you know what? Just look around. There's any number of people in business, and they're probably not half as clever and gifted as you are, and yet they're making a living, and yet they're getting places. It's really hard to find good employees. It really is. And I think most witnesses make good employees. If you put that same energy that you used to put into the organization into your work, you're going to really go places, and you deserve it. You that the organization has taken. And I would even put it out there, Quinn. This is, I'm not sure if I've spoken to you about this, but I would even put it out there, Quinn, that because of the way the organization has exploited people as volunteers for decades, they cannot exist. Let me explain. They have basically taken so much from people financially and never given anything back. They've just lined their own pockets. That's why I think they're going to face financial ruin. It's almost like a spiritual law. You cannot keep emptying something and leaving this massive void of where you've taken and taken from people and it not come back on you. And one of my moments where I woke up to understand that there was a spiritual issue in not paying people is there's an account in the Old Testament where they are repairing the temple. And the account is very interesting. We never read it as witnesses. The account goes into detail about how they decided that instead of using gold for everything, they would use timber and they would rather pay the skilled craftsmen and the workmen that they were using. They would pay the workmen a wage so they can look after their families. And it says very clearly in scripture, because they prioritized paying those who worked on the temple a wage to cover the costs for their family, the project was blessed by God. And everybody respected the foreman and those in charge of this project. That passage was never read in one single meeting or watchtower the whole 40 years that I was a witness. I left at 42. I did not remember ever coming across that particular account because you know what it says is basically saying if you're building or repairing something that is a building dedicated to God and to worship, pay the workers a wage and it will be blessed for it. Isn't it interesting that that was never done by the organization? I believe that is on a spiritual level already it is bankrupt and ruined because it cannot have blessing because of the exploitation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I mean, witnesses work hard. I mean, if you look at, say, like the world headquarters they just built like 5 or 6 years ago, it is an impressive building. To build something that skillful and you don't pay a dime for your workers that they worked hard at, why can't they just contract other brothers and sisters like Jehovah's? Like, it doesn't have to be volunteer. Like, why not just hire witnesses to do it? It's no different than, say, if you have a plumbing problem and you have a friend that's in plumbing say, hey, I got a can you come and I'll pay you? Like, why can't the organization just have done that with all their skilled workers? Hey, we're making this huge project, so we're gonna pay you. but they don't. They exploit them and use them. Like, no, we're gonna manipulate you to make this structure for free. But they do pay other people. Like they will pay when they have to have an outside source come in for something that they don't have a skill, like a witness that doesn't have the skill. So why would you treat the outside better than your own people? It doesn't make any sense. And then like they just sold or not, they didn't just sell it, but their old headquarters in Brooklyn, they sold that for I don't know how many millions of dollars, maybe even a billion. I don't know what the cost of the building was. Maybe not a billion, but it wasn't cheap. So,
No, I think it was 2 billion.
oh, okay, so that number
They
might
made
be
a lot.
right.
They made
Yeah.
they would have made billions from it. But like I said, their finances are very, very fishy. There seems to be a lot of money that is not really traceable and goes missing. That we know this. We know Jehovah's Witnesses is a criminal organization. If we really started to scratch the surface, that's what it is. It's a criminal organization. But I also think that it is particularly bad in the finance area because like you said, what they build fancy Bethels, but they don't pay the workers. And one of the things that people said about Dubai, because I don't know if you know about this in America, but in the Europe, Dubai is the place to visit because it's all these brilliant big structures. When they built Dubai, it was kind of a scandal that they were getting very, very poor people from places like India and housing them in terrible conditions and paying them absolutely tiny wages to build all those big, massive structures. And that was frowned upon. Witnesses are worse. They don't pay people anything. And what's even worse is when they built the new Bethel here outside London, Chelmsford, I knew some young people. For example, a young pioneer couple in my congregation, they had just bought their first place, an apartment. They were so desperate to work on this project, they sold this apartment and bought a house right next to the new Bethel in that area. So they would be so close that Bethel would have to kind of take them and have them work there. So they were prepared to actually sell the property they'd managed to buy in London, a young couple, just married, not had kids yet. They sold their property to just help on a Chelmsford project for 2, 3 years. And lots of people did that and were proud of it. We sold our house. We took the money. We came with our own expenses paid to work on this project for however many months it went on for. And then what? You have nothing afterwards. But you have that badge of honor. I was at Chelmsford. We sold our house to be there. Imagine like a halo. And that type of actually really irresponsible financial behavior is rewarded. Stupidity is rewarded. Giving your time for free is rewarded. You think it's for God. Did God really tell you to do that?
That's where the
That's
brainwashing
what
comes in.
this is it. It's actually madness. It's madness. And I know so many people do it. They genuinely, sincerely think they're doing the right thing, that that's what God wants them to do. No, it's 8 men in America who are running a property business. And even one of the official registration companies in the UK, I can't remember if it's the IBSA one or one of the others, recently changed the nature of the business to property development. So it's a property development business. So Watchtower and Jehovah's Witnesses organization, ultimately what it is a property development company, and it used to be a publishing company. I would say now they just create a bit of content online. They still publish a bit, but that's it really. Um, you know, that's basically, and then they have a very, very clever theology about being the only true religion and faith to feed people to get their staff for free.
And I just had a thought too as you were talking. So all how they don't pay their workers, like you were saying, how that's worse than people like getting people from other countries and paying them little wages because they're poor, that they don't pay them at all. And another thing I just thought of is that okay, so they're building these huge Bethel buildings and assembly halls. They do pay when they need outside help if they don't have witnesses that have the skill. So they are willing to pay for certain work, but they don't pay their own workers instead of just contracting through witnesses and hiring witnesses to do it. But then let's say that a witness, um, because they're living a paycheck to paycheck, ends up in a situation where they're behind in their rent and they're facing eviction. The organization doesn't care. They're not going to give you one penny. They're not going to give you nothing. They're just going to open up the Bible and say, trust in Jehovah. He'll provide what you need. But other churches who don't make near the money that witnesses are, I mean, when you said how they sold their building for $2 billion, like that's what I thought it was something like that. They're a $1 billion corporation. There's hole in the wall churches that are nowhere near as big as Jehovah's Witness religion, and they will have programs where they help people who pay their rent. There's programs where, say, like you can go to a church and explain a situation. If you're facing eviction, they will pay it, and you don't have to pay the money back. And you don't even have to be a part of that church. Some of those churches will just do it for their community. And some of these churches that are doing it, they're not bringing in the billions that Watchtower is with all their shady investments and flipping and buying real estate and all the shady stuff they're doing. But why not? Why can't the organization say, okay, you worked on the Bethel project, you helped build Warwick headquarters, and you work for free, but you know what? You need some money. Okay, don't worry, Bethel, don't worry, we'll pay. They don't do that, not even to their own members. But why not though? Because the whole organization is set up on narcissistic principles. In so many ways, it's a narcissistic religion. And just like the narcissists discard you, that's how they treat their members. They discard you. They will use you, drain you for all the energy they can get, build all the free buildings, have circuit overseas till they're 70 years old doing the work. And then when they don't need you, they just discard you and they don't care. They're not going to give you anything. But it's pretty sickening. But just before I want you to show those stats too that you were showing me. But my personal experience with the whole financial ruin, as far as how I'm still dealing with it, is I still have, like as you described it, that poverty mentality. Because as witnesses, we've been broken down to be good for nothing slaves. They use that scripture like it's a good thing. You're a good for nothing slave, and we're so brainwashed we think it sounds good. Yeah, I'm a good for nothing slave, good for nothing slave. But so that mentality still kind of at least sticks with me, where I know that I'm capable of starting my own business and doing all this stuff, but I still have that slave mentality of like, oh no, I can't be successful in that. So that thinking still holds me back from doing great things of that JW good for nothing slave mentality. And so recently I made a big move. I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I had about like $4,000 saved up, which is not a lot at all when you consider the fact of like, hey, this is your life savings. And out of nowhere, it's like $3,000 is gone. And I'm like, where did that money even go? Like, I don't know where it went. And it's because I still have that paycheck to paycheck mentality. Like, I'll go in a store and just buy stuff because, oh, I have the money. Oh, I got that much money in the bank. And then it's like, where did all the money go? And that's the JW mentality, because it's a mentality of, oh, just paycheck to paycheck. Uh, as long as you have what you need for the day, right? Take it one day at a time. Don't worry, Joe will provide. And I have to try to learn to be more responsible, to not just like, just because I have the money in the bank, it doesn't mean I need to spend it or that I can't spend it. I need to build money up in the bank for my future. And so that's what I'm trying to learn now, is get rid of that JW mentality, and understand that Armageddon is not coming. I need to be prepared that, I'm going to grow old and die in this lifetime. And I don't want to end up in a nursing home. I'm not going to end up in a nursing home. I want to be able to have my own property and be able to afford what I need, and not be completely reliant on the state system. But that's just uh, my take on the whole thing as far as how it's affected me personally, that mindset. And I also am glad that I'm back to working basically full time, where I'm not afraid to work full time. I was always afraid to work full time because, oh, I have to pioneer and do all this stuff. Um so I'm now learning that you pretty much, unless you've got a lot of money in the bank, you want to be able to make sure that you're making enough money for the future. And not just the paycheck to paycheck. But that's just, I guess, a little bit of what I'm going through with it. But could you actually share those stats? Because when you show me those stats, it it visualized like what we're talking about. That witnesses by design have been set up for financial ruin. It's a specific design. There's a reason for it.
Yes, so we found some really interesting stats about how Jehovah's Witnesses, certainly in the United States, are one of the absolute dirt poorest religious groups. So you could argue, where is the evidence of blessing here? So let's have a look at a couple of examples. Now, this particular example is the slightly older one, but I think it's a clearer one because it's the household income in 2000. I'll show you one in a minute, which is 2022, and you'll see that not a lot has changed. As you can see, it's very interesting here that the absolute poorest group is Jehovah's Witnesses. The household income is so low that I don't know how they're actually surviving. And heaven, God forbid anybody gets sick, what happens? I guess that's when, like you said, then brothers and sisters try and help each other out. It's again a way to kind of keep you in the faith. But this isn't normal, guys. This is not normal for a group of people that are trying to live by biblical principles, to be paying their taxes and working hard at whatever little job they have. That your income should not be this low. I actually think that you need to ask some serious questions about why witnesses are so low on this scale. And I find it quite interesting that the Jews are the wealthiest. That might not be a surprise, but certainly since I left, I have had quite a lot of dealings with the evangelical born again type of faith people. And isn't it interesting that they are among the high earners? And the mindset, despite them reading the Bible as much as witnesses, if not more, the mindset is totally different. Their mindset is that God wants you to be a success because you're expressing God's kingdom here on earth. You have actually got almost like a domain of your own, which is expressing the kingdom through you. And the way that you attract people to the faith is being a success. So, whatever workplace you're in, you excel, and you don't even have to give a witness through your words. The fact that you're a success in life is going to make people ask, what's your secret? And that's when you tell them you're a Christian. And the thinking they also have is that everybody is unique and gifted and created as an individual with lots of gifts that God has given you, and He wants you to excel and use those. And I just think it's interesting that people can be reading essentially the same book supposedly, and one group ends up pit poor, and the other ends up double the income. So I think you have to ask some questions about what the teachings are that you're listening to from Jehovah's Witnesses if the result is extreme poverty.
And
And I'll show
before
you,
I was going to say,
yes,
before you go to the next slide, I just wanted to comment too that some witnesses may watch this and say, "Oh no, I make more than $24,000." Just to make it clear, is that this is the average. So when you go into your congregation and you look at all the publishers in your congregation, you're going to start to see the truth in that number because a lot of pioneers, that's what they're making, who are like working part-time, the pioneer. Um, and then like Samantha, what you were saying earlier is how many witnesses are on government benefits and things like that. So there's always going to be a couple of people in a congregation that are considered that they're not spiritual and they may make pretty good money. But when you look in your congregation and you picture the faces of everybody in the congregation, for those XJWs watching this, just think of the congregation you were last in and everyone who attended that congregation. And when you start to put these people in your mind, this number looks pretty accurate because you're going to start to see, oh yeah, those pioneers working part-time or those people who aren't working at all, they're just on government benefits. Then you got a lot of times people, I know of a couple, or not a couple, but two sisters who were in their 40s. They both lived at home with their parents. And that's how they survived working part-time to pioneer. So you get a lot of that stuff too. You get a lot of grown-ups living at home um, so that they can work for little so they can do all this Jehovah's Witness free labor stuff. But when you average it, yeah, that's the average amount of witnesses that are encouraged work part time. And also another thing too is they're not making any overtime. So even people that don't make a lot of money per hour, the average person is still going to pick up overtime when they can. Witnesses aren't making any overtime either. They're frowned upon. So I just want to say, yeah, that's an accurate number as far as the average of Jehovah's Witnesses.
and you know what you were talking about earlier just keeps coming back to my mind of people retiring from being a circuit overseer at 70. Sometimes they have a child or children first, then become COs later. But if they haven't done that, they might be in a situation where they have no children, no grandchildren. They have no home they own. Whereas other people who have worked their whole lives by that point will have paid off their house, probably helped their children and grandchildren to get on their feet as well. And they'll be taking cruises and enjoying life and playing golf and visiting the children and grandchildren. And witnesses have been actually robbed of that. They really have been robbed of just normal, everyday, enjoyable life. And I just think that's pretty cruel and horrendous to do.
And I just
Uh,
want to say too, the circuit overseer thing, his salary is worse than that. So for those that don't think that's an accurate number, the circuit overseer's income is probably like less than 10,000 for a year as far as what numbers they're making, maybe even less than that. Who knows what type of income that those people are getting, but it's going to be less than 24,000 a year for people like circuit overseers. And that's a good point you mentioned too, Samantha, about the house. I didn't think about it. Even their car owns to it belongs to the branch. The car that they drive, the branch provides them with cars. So they have nothing.
hmm. They have nothing. Um, I think with people like that, you kind of almost hope they don't wake up before they die, because if they then retire, spend a bit of time actually either reading the Bible properly, or they, again, heaven forbid, go on YouTube and watch a couple of videos by ex-witnesses that ask some tricky questions and start to maybe, change their opinion on things. Imagine waking up, and that does happen. I've had communications because of the videos on my channel from individuals who have had exactly that experience. They've sacrificed their whole life for the organization to be in full-time service, only to then wake up in their 60s and 70s, realize that they've basically missed out on everything, and they have nothing now because they spent it in the organization. And you know what? We get how horrific that is, but the world is not going to be that sympathetic, because they're going to basically say you had a choice and you stayed and you did that. But we know how deep the deception is and how many people genuinely think they're doing God's work. So what I would also say is, let's look at this other Pew Research from 2020, income distribution by religious group. It's not as easy to read, but I would like to point out how high up Jehovah's Witnesses are. Now, the only group I could find on this chart that has more people that earn less than 30,000 a year was the historically Black Protestant. Okay, so it's witnesses are really the blue bit there shows that almost half of witnesses earn less than 30,000 a year. And this sliver at the other end is only 4% would own $100,000 a year and more. So it's a very small percentage, because even the other quite poor group has at least double the amount of people that are earning that kind of money. And again, if we go to the bottom here and have a look, you'll notice that interestingly, the Muslims as well have got quite a lot of that, but Jews, yes, consistently Jewish tend to be higher income earners. And it is by group, but witnesses stand out again with very low average household annual income. So 2020, post-pandemic situation hasn't improved.
Yeah, and
So
I
I,
think, oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's something to consider. Why is that mentality maintained and encouraged among witnesses? It's very reckless, actually, and it's kind of a dangerous mindset. It puts you into a lot of poverty. And like I said, looking from the outside in, which is now easy to do in hindsight, they don't want you to have an education, and they don't want you to have enough income to be able to have a voice or any power and influence in society, because that comes with a bit of wealth. And I think you've got to ask why. Why would they want supposedly God's people to be the pit poorest, most insignificant group of all? Why? Who does that actually serve? And I think those are questions that are good to ask.
Yeah, and I'm gonna just throw my own information on this chart, just to add further proof and weight to it. So in 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, 2022, when I filed my taxes in 23 for the year 2002, my yearly income that I made in 2022 was 32,000. So I was right slightly above that average of less than, was it less than 30,000 that it was saying? And so I have a like a good skill to have, like I can make a lot of money. So, but because I was pioneering, I was a ministerial servant, I was volunteering on um Kingdom Hall construction and things like that, that I pretty much only worked 2 to 3 days a week. And even some of those days weren't that long because I just worked part-time on my skill. And a lot of times I just worked on call where I didn't have a specific schedule. So I would go and just like work a day or two, and then okay, I made enough for the week. So that's how little money that I made, where I could have been making a lot more just with the skill that I have. So that my ex-wife, she also worked in the hospital as a CNA, and she made less than I made. Um, and she made okay money, but again, she worked part-time. She worked, I think it was 24 hours a week was all that she worked because we were pioneering together. So she also could have been working full-time and doubled that just working full-time. She also could have done a lot more overtime. So we both had decent jobs like our skill level, but we both chose to work as little as possible. And we got praised for that. Oh, we're always out in service. Oh, look, they're a spiritual couple. So then in 2023 is when I left Witnesses. I left technically in June 2023. So um I immediately just started working more with the same job that I had. And then it still wasn't a lot of money, but just because I made the transition when I left Witnesses, then for the year 2023, I made like over 50,000. And I'm not saying that's a lot of money at all. It's still not a lot of money, but just that quick from starting the year off with working part-time and doing all this Jehovah's Witness free labor stuff, just that one shift halfway through the year when I said enough of this crap and I left Witnesses and I started just working more, I right away almost doubled the next year, like over 50,000, just like that. And again, I'm not saying that's a lot of money because if I had the right mindset at the beginning of the year, I'd be pushing close to 100,000 in the year, in that particular year. So I seen the difference when I left, and that was not even consciously. That was just me saying enough for this part-time JW volunteer crap. I'm going to work and make money. So just by that shift, now that so say like next year when I file, my whole finance is going to be greatly improved on a scale like that. But uh that is just a result of this religion. It's by design. It's not a coincidence. It's by design. They keep people really below that 30,000 mark on average. If you're doing what they want you to do, if you're pioneering, if you're not working overtime on the weekends, if because you're out in service, if you're volunteering your vacation time to work on Bethel projects, if you're the typical spiritual person doing all those things, you're going to be making under 30,000 a year, most likely. And the witnesses that are making way more than that is because they're not the ones that are so-called spiritual, right? They're the ones who they're not pioneering, they're not out in service every weekend. Um, but that's my assessment. That's my personal story. It's how it's affected me. And again, I can see the improvements as soon as I left Witnesses. My yearly income shot up immediately as soon as I left Witnesses. But do you have any final thoughts and just basically words of wisdom for mainly for the XJWs because this video is more so for XJWs who recognize we're brainwashed, but may still be in that mindset. So we're all in that mindset. We leave Witnesses. If we were good witnesses, we don't have really any savings. We don't have property because we're good witnesses. So just what would be your closing thoughts for the XJW community to to fix this situation um if they have this problem?
I think a lots are. And also, some might be hit financially leaving. So before I left, I had retrained as a counselor. I always wanted to work with brothers and sisters. I could see that there was a lot of mental health issues in the organization, and many would not have counseling with a counselor that wasn't a witness because they thought it might jeopardize their faith. So I had trained and I started to build that client base among witnesses, and I had lots of witness counseling clients when I left. And the elders quite rightly said to me as I left, and I knew this already, I need to disclose to these clients that I'm no longer going to be a witness. Now, some left straight away, some continued the work because they knew me, they trusted me, and then we continued the work until they finished. But that meant that I transitioned to doing quite different type of work. And also, even though I still will be doing some counseling work, I'm now doing a really lovely mixture of some counseling, but a lot more of the other stuff, the communications. And that's what my business is in communications. What I would say as advice, and I think these are some things to bear in mind. Now, this is going to maybe help those that maybe still worry about the conditioning the organization's placed in your mind. Think about it. The Israelites were told to work 6 days a week and have one day off. So I would say, even though we live in the West where people work 5 days a week and have the weekend off, work. You're meant to work. You're meant to work 5, 6 days a week. That's actually what you should be doing with your life. And that's biblical. That's not non biblical. It's just the organization decided that you should do stuff that they dictate. But that was not anything God ever dictated. God wants you to work and see the product of your hands and enjoy that. It's very clear if you think of all the scriptures about it. And the other thing I think is a real thing is that mindset is very damaging that you should be poor. And I also think that there are quite a lot of, if you believe in this type of thing, I believe you kind of leave the organization cursed in a way because you kind of agreed with all of that. You agreed with all that poverty is good and you shouldn't work that much type of thing. And you should live day to day. And it's quite irresponsible sort of thinking. And I think you need to break that type of thinking off your mind. So if you still have a faith and you pray, ask for God to break any financial curses off your life and to start to actually guide you and bless you financially. Nothing wrong with praying that. And I would say start saying statements. So we can either call them positive affirmations or sometimes Christians will call these confessions. You can find them online. Start saying things like, I'm successful, I have solutions. Just start making positive statements over your mind, yourself, every single day. Spend a couple minutes on it every morning. I've been recently, if people know me well, I've never been great with timekeeping, for example, and being organized. I've started stating over myself that I'm on time and I'm organized. I've been doing that for a couple of weeks. Things have changed a lot. That's just a simple example. And the other thing is educate yourself. Fill your mind with completely opposite information to what the organization gave you. Start reading or watching videos about how you can be successful in whatever business you're in or whatever profession you're in. And think about also your own values. For example, in my case, money has never been one of my biggest values. For me, what's more important is to make a difference for people. So I have figured out a way to use my communication skills to help people. And as long as my motive is that I can use my skills to help people, that's keeping me really motivated, regardless of the money side of it. That will follow. But it gives me joy. It gives me a lot of contentment in the work I do. I love it. I was thinking that just today. I get to do lots of different things, meet different people, go to different events. I've got a huge network. As a witness, I had quite a big network of people because I was quite sociable. I've got a much bigger network now. And what's more important about my network is these are highly gifted individuals, some of them of high net worth as well. I'm going in the right direction. I'm moving with the people I should have always been moving with. And that's kind of where you want to get to. You want to get into that place where you're putting out a positive vibe, a positive energy. I can do this. I have lots to give. So you have to work on your confidence. You have to work on feeling that actually, why shouldn't I be a success? Other people are a success, and there's not that much difference between us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And just as another thing to add, um, just one perspective I want to put out there too is that for those who have XJW channels, it's great and it's great if you can make money off of it too, but don't think of that as a long-term plan for retirement. Don't, and this is just me giving my advice. I'm not saying I'm right about it, but this is just my perspective on it, is that um some XJW channels may spend their whole livelihood as their career, like making a living off of it. And Watchtower is going down. This religion's going down. It's not going to be so. We're all going to be out of a job soon at some point, as far as the XJW activist work. The organization is going down. So I would just be more realistic with that of think of the XJW channels as a side hobby. So I would just look at the XJW videos and stuff like that as like I have my stuff monetized, and the way that I look at it is Watchtower has taken so much money from me. They owe me hundreds of thousands of dollars the way that I see it. So if monetizing my videos is gonna, if it's gonna pay for my internet and my phone and load of stuff like that, I'll take it. But I just look at it as a side hobby, not as a career. Um, so just think everyone in the XJW community to have a plan on of having a career and a retirement, something long term that's going to be sustainable. But don't try to get rich off of this kind of stuff, because I hope that Watchtower is going to get shut down soon, and then we're not going to have any content anyway. We're going to be done. We have to move on to something bigger than Watchtower. So we want to get out of this whole identity of where XJWs soon is going to be a thing of the past. So thank you guys for watching, and we look forward to bringing you more content very soon.